Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. This is Ghazala Amin for MSPM's Prm700 course, Advanced Project Management, and this would be your lecture number 6. Hopefully by this time you have continued to grasp the concepts that were given in the first lecture of what project management is all about, project, program, sub-project, and we also got into a little bit of detail about the 5 main phases of the project life cycle. The project life cycle would be the start and the end of any project. The triple constraints, the cost, the scope, and the time constraints that are the boundaries of any project, that actually gives us a limitation to ensure that the project is successfully meeting its targets. Sometimes the constraints are not called constraints, they are actually the assets to the project manager. And why are they the assets? These assets gives the project manager some kind of tangible result that can be produced to satisfy the customer's need and expectation. The definition of a project, again, it's a temporary endeavor to create a unique product or service. And another one important concept in that is its intent is to meet or exceed the customer's expectation. Customer being the center stage for ultimate claim of whether the project has met its targeted goals or not. So, along with customer satisfaction, the project needs to make sure that it's meeting all the triple constraints also. Then the concept of the program. Successful implementation of all projects leading to a successful program or not. Again, some of the conversation that went on along those lines. Sub-projects, portfolios, the project life cycle, the bell curve. During the execution phase, the maximum use of resources, the resources being not just the human resources but the man, material and the machine. We also call it the 3M. Then we talked about the 5 phases. Initiation, the planning, the monitoring and control, the execution going hand in hand, and then the closure phase. There's also an indirect dotted line between all of the phases to the closure phase. Every phase needs a customer sign-off or some kind of a tangible document that the customer signs up and gives a green light signal, not just the customer but your own parent organization, the project organization, to give a green signal to the project manager to continue on to the next phase of the project. However, there are certain lines, arrows, that dictate the movement of the phases within a project life cycle. The only time the monitoring and control goes back to the planning board could be because of a change that could be coming into a project. Another concept to remember is that changes are always not negative. Changes could also be beneficial to the project manager. It means that the project, any scope that was ignored or any oversight can be fixed during the execution of the project. In case of a change, another concept that was given was the change control board, the CCB board. Who should be the participants of the CCB board? We all need to understand as project managers that all changes need to be recorded, whether small or big, whether 2-hour change or a 20-hour change. However, anytime the changes are affecting the triple constraints, the scope, the original intended scope, the time, the deadline that was initially given in the project charter, or the cost, that change needs to be recorded, properly documented with a good cause and effect analysis, and presented in front of the CCB board. The CCB board is the ultimate decision maker body to decide whether the change needs to be implemented or not. And the reason is the visionary capability of the CCB board members. They are the upper level managers that understand the benefit or the long-term goals of the project that is being executed. Upon its successful sign-off, the project manager takes the change and goes back to the drawing board, which is the planning phase, and hence the whole cycle starts again with execution and the monitoring and control and the bi-directional arrows, ultimately going into the closure phase. At this point in time, we all need to understand that there are certain tasks in the closure phase that are always part of your original activity list. So you're not planning of doing the closure task at the end. It needs to be planned out in the beginning. So the resources and the project manager understand that it's an important phase and would need time, effort, and money for execution at the end of the project, while everybody is in a hurry to move on to other projects or to more greener pastures. We also talked about different methodologies. We also talked about one of the major methodologies or the major governing board of project management processes at this point in time being the PMI, Project Management Institute. PMI has its own body of knowledge, which is called the Project Management Body of Knowledge, PMBOK. If you look at the 4th edition components of the PMBOK, they have 9 knowledge areas, all scattered within the 5 phases, which is the initiation, planning, monitoring, and control. And then, if you look at that Excel spreadsheet from the previous lectures, the 9 knowledge areas on the left-hand side or the left-hand column. Within the 9 knowledge areas, strewn across the 5 phases, are the 42 processes. The 42 processes are spread out across the 5 phases and could be core process or could be a facilitating process. There was another slide that was given to you, which I had advised to get a color printout because it's color coded. If you put it out in a visible location at the end of the semester, you would have automatically understood why there are certain processes, the order or the sequential or the chronological order of those processes, why are they so important, and which phase do they exist. From this point onwards, let's start off and start thinking and talking about some of the project organization and integration. Our slide that we've looked at several times now, and you will continue to see this, is if you look at this now, it kind of starts making sense. Project life cycle is the totality of it all. The processes out there. Your management of human resources should continue throughout the project. Your change and your risk management techniques. And your own individual skill of identifying and analyzing risk and change as a project manager should continue from initiation to the closure phase. And then contract and customer relationship management. That also needs to continue throughout. The task becomes more complex if you have subcontractors working for you in this project. And throughout the life cycle of the project, the subcontractors are required to give you deliverables at a certain point in time. The timeliness, the exact delivery, making sure that it's meeting the intended scope, and managing your subcontractors. is a vital task for a project manager and definitely brings in more complexity to the project life cycle. So let's read this slide and look at the project parameters and the goals of it. All projects have one primary goal. For example, the development of a new camera of any new product, construction of a railway station, a very tangible kind of a project, regeneration of a derelict neighborhood, or process re-engineering for a large organization. If you remember some of our few things from the last lecture, we also talked about that little arrow, the manufacturing plants being at the bottom, and then NASA Department of Defense at the topmost, and then certain organizations falling in between. The goal must be as specific as possible so that there is no ambiguity about what the project intends to achieve. So we are talking about the scope. In addition to the primary goal, projects may have sub-goals and subsidiary goals or the objectives. Obviously, when we talk about the definition of the project and we are saying intended, meeting the documented needs of the customer or the intended expectations of the customer. Some are stated clearly, while some are not stated clearly, but starts coming out once they start or once they look at the progress of the project. The project goal and project deliverables, along with all the requirements and specifications, which must be met by the project for it to be considered complete, determine the project's scope. A project which does not achieve its goal is seen as failed. Let me clarify one thing. If you read through it, there are always signs between the project's initiation and ultimate claim of being labeled as a failed project. There are always signs in between that can indicate to the sponsors and the project manager that this project is becoming a troubled project. It's the responsibility of the project manager to identify these as risks to the project. A risk which has happened and has occurred becomes an issue, and it needs to be tackled appropriately. However, when you talk about being informed project manager and subsequently making your customer an informed customer, it's your responsibility to identify some of these risks or elements that are causing your project to become troubled. All these need to be highlighted and documented as part of your project status report during your monitoring and control phase of the project, or could also be in the planning phase, or could also be identified as risks in your initiation phase of the project if you see those early signs of trouble. Some of the important topics in a project, and I'm hoping that throughout the course we would have highlighted most of them. We will talk briefly about each one of these bullets, but then try to give you more examples and more concrete ways of dealing with these situations or these parameters throughout the lecture. Project proposal, the contract and the charter, the elicitation of project requirements and specifications, project statement of work, and the project scope statement. Let's limit this group and talk briefly about all of them. All these statements are being used or being documented in the initiation phase of the project. If you recall what is happening in the initiation phase of the project, at this point in time, according to the bell curve, there you as project manager have access to minimal number of resources. Your existence as full-time person working on this project is also fairly shaky. Most of the time, project managers are not brought in as a full-time resource during the initiation phase of the project. So you are reliant, you and your project organization is reliant on maybe 2 or 3 resources, could be working part-time, trying to go out to the customer and grabbing and reaching out for information for your project charter. In our project world, the first document that gets created is called the project charter document. We also fondly hear of words as proposal or sometimes as a contract, because it's nothing but a contract between the customer and your project organization and yourself as project manager. You're going out and bringing in the scope and the requirement. Statement of work, we also have a definition of it in more details in the later phases of the project, the presentations. Statement of work is usually used in the IT world and is never used when you're creating a brand new product. It is usually for extensions or enhancements when the product is out there and you need a new functionality added to that product. So all these statements, from proposal to the scope statement, are kind of happening within the project initiation phases of the project. Project work breakdown structure is a breakdown or listing of all the activities at that point in time as understood by the project manager or the project team. It's listing of all the activities that will take your project from point A to point Z. We can spend 2 presentations on project work breakdown structure, but obviously because of time limitations, we will discuss the theoretical aspects of project work breakdown structure and then get into more detail of it in later courses. But we will definitely spend some time because of its importance in a project life cycle. Scope creep, control and verification. Scope creep, unidentified changes which changes the intended phase or intended scope of the project. Controlling and verifying it. Then change management. In the earlier slide, we looked at how change management need to be monitored and work closely or analyzed from the starting to the end of the project. And then the integration management. Taking little pearls of work processes and putting them in one string so it becomes a pearl string. Major responsibility of a project manager to start it off from basic and then coming out with a product or a service. One comprehensive slide, and we'll talk about this for a few minutes. The project output and the outcome. If we use highway as an example, if you recall, construction industry, civil engineering was the first to grab hold to the concept of project management because of the effectiveness and the efficiency of following certain processes and the desired outcome that is a result of following those processes. You talk about the project phases. The project life cycle, and that's the start of the project phase, the initiation, and then the planning, implementation, monitoring, and controlling, and then the closure of the project. All this goes on and results in a project output. It all comes down to some positive or some negative benefits. If you look at it, there could be several impacts of that particular project. If you look at the economic impact, it's the impact on investment, the trade, the local businesses, the tourism, employment. It could be a cause of inflation, wealth accumulation, and distribution. Construction of a highway can have major impact on economy. Another aspect or another impact could be a social impact. Construction of a highway, a major highway, could have impact on services like health and education, travel, crime, social relations, communities' outlook and values. Think about M2 highway right now, the motorway. How life has changed for people residing between Lahore and Islamabad and all the subsequent areas, and now from Islamabad to Peshawar and all the subsequent areas located between those cities. And it is moving on. A major network. Traveling time reduced substantially. A lot of things, and maybe we are looking at all of the positive aspects or the impacts of it. Well, there are several negative impacts to it too. And that the negative impact, the biggest negative impact that I can think of is probably the environment. More cars, more pollution. So what could be a positive impact on one end could also be a negative impact on the other hand. And we always need to weigh the positiveness and the negativeness of any impact to understand the overall picture. So let's look at the environmental impact of it. Impact on fauna and flora, pollution levels, waste accumulation and disposal. Those were the outcomes and the impacts. If you look at the left-hand side, those are the operations phase. And you look at the short-term, the medium-term and the long-term projects. Let's look at some of the non-projects, and we're going to use this example to move on to the next slide, which is what are projects and what not are projects. Not projects are the routine maintenance and repair. And most of us are guilty of using the term project for a lot of not projects. So let's look at projects. It could be highway extension. That is a big change. So for example, the first project could have been from, again using just hypothetical change, from Islamabad to Lahore. Then we extended the highway from Islamabad to Peshawar. That is still considered unique, temporary. So highway extension could be considered a project. Widening, now you're adding a total new lane to it. Or the recarpeting of it. If it's not considered part of regular maintenance of filling out the potholes, making sure there are no cracks, visible cracks on the road, the driving conditions are considered normal, then the recarpeting effort would be considered a new project. Construction of bridges, additional exit and entrance ramps, petrol stations and rest stops could be considered projects. The not projects are, again reiterating, the routine maintenance and repair. Having said all that, let's move on to some of the major projects in Pakistan. And there are so many, but the best projects are which have tangible results. Even though we are fondly using a lot of projects from within the NGO organization, but lovingly we tend to hold or put our fingers to tangible or projects that are built in mortar and claiming those as projects. Whatever we are doing or using, and if I use NGO as an example, we should have tangible results before and after. And the tangible results kind of give us a sound footing of what we started with. And if we are claiming success, this is what we have done or this is what we have achieved. So what would be some of the major projects in Pakistan? Tarbela Dam, Mangla Dam, Hapko, Kotadu, Chashma, nuclear power station, the Islamabad-Lahore motorway being one of the highlights of our nation right now, Islamabad to Peshawar motorway, the Karakoram highway, Jinnah International, Allama Iqbal International Airport, the Muslim Commercial Bank, the National Stadium Karachi long time ago, the Shah Faisal Mosque, Shaukat Khanum Memorial Hospital, the JF-17 Sino-Pakistan combat aircraft. When you look at these projects, some are considered small projects, some are considered very complex projects, some have more emphasis on customer relationship, some have more emphasis on meeting the scope, or have more effect or have more concentration on the technical capabilities of the project manager or the project team. So it's variation of it all. And there are multiple more, there are many more that are going on and will continue to go on. The world is getting projectized, and here we are looking at all the projects and being educated project managers. So what projects are not? Projects must not be confused with an organization's ongoing and recurring operations. For example, customer invoicing and billing, fabrication or assembly of automobiles. Remember, and if you back of your head, if you keep that little slide in front of you, organizations that were at the bottom and organizations that were at the top, and all the organizations that are in between with the arrow going upwards. Customer invoicing and billing, fabrication or assembly of automobile, bottom, airline flights, you go in, you go out, you go in, you go out. Advising a bank client of stock market investment opportunities. It's also part of consultation, but it's advising that person on a day-to-day basis because you are hired as doing so. Treatment of patients in a hospital emergency ward and counseling of soldiers on a tour of wartime duty are not projects, even though they may exhibit project characteristics, goal, time frame, and cost. Before I move on, let me spend a little bit of time, because I'm sure that is also creating a little bit of, or maybe quite a bit of questions in your head. So if you look at airline flights, for example, the first time PK396 flies from Islamabad to Toronto could be considered a project. It's unique because it was never done before. It's temporary because it has a time bound. And it's intended to meet a certain goal, which is flying from one destination to the other. Starting on time and ending on time is very crucial. So the first time it's done could be considered a project. But repeated effort from that point onwards is not considered a project because it becomes monotonous and repeatable. If I look at other times, counseling of soldiers on a tour of wartime duty, the unpredictability of the end result causes something to be not a project. And especially when you're dealing with human resources. If you're starting off a new program, or if you're offering a brand new program in university, it's a project because you're offering it for the first time. You're setting up all your tools, your techniques, bringing in the students, advertising it for the first time, and then every semester when you start offering it, now it does not fall in the category of being a project. So doing things for the first time has a little bit of that unpredictability of how it will go. When you can predict something and the tasks are already out there, you kind of move out from being a project to now being a repeatable or a monotonous process. Project organization structure. Now there are two kinds of organizations in the world. There are the project-based organizations, and then there are the non-project organizations. Let's talk a little bit about the project-based organization. There are very few, even though we still claim, or we are claiming, that the world is getting projectized. And why? Because of the depleting resources. Slowly and gradually we are living in a world of depleting resources. And that is why it's the importance of using those resources effectively to maximize the output from those resources. So having that concept in our head, we continue to claim that the world is getting projectized. However, there's still a good number of organizations. Majority of the organizations in the world are non-project based. The other grouping falls under project-based organizations. So two bullets that kind of sums it up as why it is project-based organization. Organizations that drive their revenue primarily from performing projects. Construction contractors, consultants, and engineering firms. That means you need to bring in the resources. You use those resources. Within a fixed cost, you know when to deliver it, so the schedule. You know what needs to be done, and you're only using your resources to deliver that output or that scope. You bring them in, you use them, get the work done, and say goodbye, handshake, deliver the product to the customer, and the project is all done. Then you have organizations that have adopted management by projects. A lot of organizations and a lot of multinational organizations that we have around, they're understanding the importance of having the tools and the techniques or the reporting capabilities to ensure that all are working at the maximum output level, especially their resources. So when they start looking at the efficiency of their employees, for example, or the efficiency of their processes that are out there, how much money is coming in, what are we working for, and what's the cost, the profit, the benefit level, the causes, and the effects, those organizations tend to start thinking of becoming projectized. So organizations that have adopted management by project. These are how many projects I'm doing. These are how many reports I'm doing. These are how many products or services that I've provided. These are the number of it. These are the number of employees I have. That means the number of per employee serving so many customers is this much. This is how much money I can make. If I reduce, because the maximum in a restaurant kind of a capability, in a big chain, if the customer, because now they have the report or the statistics data to look at, they're going to start estimating that between the hours of 11 to 2, I have minimum customers coming to the restaurant, so I'm going to reduce the manpower. From 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock, I have maximum load. I'm going to increase and then again minimize some of my employees from evening or 7 o'clock in the evening to 11 o'clock at night, maybe, for example. Because they have the statistical data now, they can actually play around with the situation. If not, the unpredictability does not allow them to play around with the employees' work hours, and hence reducing the profit margin that can be obtained by having that statistical data. So two things that dictate whether an organization is project based or not. Typical organizations that have a scope, timeline and cost, bring in the resources to work on the project, gets the project done 2 years, 3 years, 6 months, whatever a web page that needs to be developed. You bring in the resources, you develop the web page, you get the sign off, everybody is happy, took you 2 years to do it, delivered it on time, and you let go of the employees, or you let go of all the resources, not just the human resources, and a project is closed. That's a typical organization for a project. And then again, this other scenario that I talked about. So the non-project organizations, they often lack management system designed to support project needs effectively and efficiently. Some of our government services, you go in, you do the work and you get out. Some are producing a little bit more output, some are not. It averages out. Manufacturing companies, financial service providers, telecommunication bank, a lot of organizations in hospitals, in medical, in a lot of hospitals, medical service providers especially, they are all considered non-project organizations. Within the project organization structure, so there's this group of project-based and another group which is considered non-project. This group within the project-based organization, there's also a distinction of who are really close to the storybook definition of project and following all of the processes, while some are really lenient on following the processes. So within the project-based organization, you're falling into 3 categories. The functional organization, the projectized organization, and in between you have something called the matrix organization. When you talk about the functional organization, even though you're non-project based, or even though you're project based, you are following the traits that you inherited from the time when you were non-project based organization. So the employees and even the upper level management may or may not be trained to the stringent processes of being projectized, or does not truly understand why a certain project or why your certain organization needs to be so conscious to deliver things on time, or why is it so important to follow a certain cost or along with the timeline. So that would kind of put us or put that organization into the functional organization group. Let's look at projectized. Projectized organization is, well, over the period of time, you, the upper management, and the employees, the lower management, the team members, all have been trained, and consciously there's a work environment or a work ethics out there that drive them to be very, very conscious of delivering on time, on budget, and trying to meet the initial goals or the requirements of any deliverable. So if a task needs to be done at 5 p.m., no matter what is happening during the day, a certain employee understands that that report needs to be done and delivered by 5 p.m. And no matter what happens out there, the person or that employee will skip his or her lunch, will ignore the tea calls, and continue to work because the intent is that it is extremely important to deliver that objective on time. If you're part of that group with those work ethics, you belong to an organization which has gone projectized. Before I go into reading the definition of it, let's look at situation in between. So there's functional, where the awareness and the training lacks, and then there is an organization where the training and the work ethics and professional responsibility is probably at the max. Somewhere in between is the world of Matrix. For people who have seen the movie Matrix, that has nothing to do with this. But the matrixed environment is a blend of the organization kind of moving up into the projectized environment, training, work ethics, professional responsibility, meetings are called, agenda is given, are usually on time, meeting minutes are shared, employees understand what the tasks are and they feel accountable, and the responsible individuals understand the responsibility of delivering on time. All that understanding and training and ethics are out there and understood. If you are working in such an environment where you're moving towards it, then you are in between the world of being functional, just functional organization or projectized organization, and now you are within the world of matrix environment. So now let's go back to the definition aspect of it. Functional: an organization structure in which staff are grouped hierarchically by function and may be assigned to projects in a team. We will go back to the definitions, but let me take you here. The functional form of organization. In the functional form of organization, Work activities are structurally segmented according to their function. That is their similarity of purpose. For example, this is a typical organization where you have accounting and finance, you have your production department, you have your research and development, you have your IT marketing, you have your legal support, you have your procurement department, generally a human resource department, you have your IT department, you have your in a university you may have academics, you may have examination. In any other environment you will have your general administration. So all these are little departments and people are working in each of the departments. Within it, all of a sudden, you have been asked to do a project. A certain new program is being offered. For example, let's use, if we use hospital as an example, it is considered non-projectized, but if you look and see it, a new lab is coming up. When a new lab is coming up, a certain person is given the responsibility of, why don't you oversee the implementation and making sure the lab is created, the equipment is put in, tested, and everything is working as it's supposed to be. At that point in time, the person who's given the responsibility also continues to do his or her day-to-day activities. This is just an additional responsibility given to that person. The team members that that person has been allotted or allocated are also doing their day-to-day activities in other departments. Now comes the complexity of the functional form of organization. The lab was supposed to be fully functional in 6 weeks. You have some idea in your head as a project manager of what it needs or what it takes to get the project done on time, within budget, and to meet its initial scope requirement. You created a list of activities along with responsibility of who will be doing what task. And that is about it. You tell those people that this work needs to be done. Let's meet up every Friday after lunch and let's look at the details of where we are. 5 weeks pass and you tend to hear the same justification that each one of them is busy with the work that they're already doing. These are the hardships of being in a functional organization and trying to run projects in a functional organization. The creation of the lab that was intended to be done in 6 weeks would ultimately be done, but it would now take maybe 8 or 10 weeks. And that also after you're complaining to your sponsors that nobody is ready to do the work in the allocated time that you have assigned them. And finally, a little push, a little shove from each of the department heads, and the allocated resources get the work done. However, making it late and obviously a little bit more work and cost. So all those things are added on and make a project manager's life very difficult in a functional organization. Project managers in functional organizations must ensure that team understands that conflicting orders will be given by other managers. It's not just the team members being lethargic in this situation, it's also their own department managers not understanding the importance that, or not being aware of the situation that the team members are actually working on 2 jobs and are also getting orders from another person, and how important it is for this team member to use his or her time or balance the work needs to ensure that that work is also getting done. So sometimes the functional managers also are giving undue pressure to this particular team member, saying, I don't really care about what other things you're doing. When I tell you to do something, I need the work done on time. So it's the conflicting orders which also makes the team situation very complex in a functional organization. Let's go up and look at the definition of a matrix organization. Project manager shares responsibility with functional managers to assign priorities and direct work of assigned human resources. It's a blend of functional and projectized organization. So if functional organization is on that end, projectized is on that end, something in between is the matrix organization. If we consider the same example, let's look at a project matrix organization. The matrix organization is a form of project organization within the framework of which temporarily horizontal project levels are applied over the permanent vertical functional levels of the organization. And you'll understand this more when I'll show you the picture of the next slide. Project management defines 3 basic project matrix forms. There's a functional matrix, there's a balance matrix, and then there's a project matrix. Remember, there is functional organization on this side, there's projectized, and in between there's a matrix organization. So organizations that are early in the concept of following project processes are the functional matrix. The organization which have matured and groomed their processes and are totally trying to become more projectized are the project matrix, and in between is the balance matrix. In practice, the matrix structure can assume many different manifestations, and these may change over the course of the project life cycle. Obviously, following the patterns of the project needs or the demands of the project, from effectiveness and efficiency and the importance of delivering on time, also varies. So some organization, because of this high level, high priority project that has been assigned, all of a sudden will be following the pattern of balanced or project matrix, because all of a sudden there's a lot of push and shove and expectations from your project sponsors to deliver on time, on budget, and within the scope. A weak matrix organization complicates team development process and activities. Remember, wherever you see the word weak, that is the functional organization or the matrix organization in its infancy stages of moving from the functional to the matrix organization. So the weak matrix, the functional matrix, or the functional organization, you and your team needs to understand that conflicting orders will be given. There are always 2 managers that are trying to direct you and engage you in their tasks, and that you have to prioritize your own time to deliver those activities, and obviously that would complicate the work activities in your project. Let's look at what this balanced project matrix is. Now let's look at 3 situations. There are 3 functional managers. The project manager has been assigned. So if you start thinking of that creation of the lab situation in a typical hospital, you were the admin staff or you were the administrator of the hospital operations. All of a sudden, you have been assigned from your administrative responsibilities to work in creation of this particular lab. So you also have other responsibilities in addition to this brand new responsibilities. So you are part of the administrative group of the hospital. From different organizations, you will beg, borrow, steal resources, or they could be allocated because everybody sits down in a meeting and says, okay, I'm going to give you a lab staff, I'm going to give you a testing staff, I'm going to give you a janitor, I'm going to provide the construction workers, the procurement department will probably allocate a resource to ensure that the equipment is delivered on time, or even the ordering process has taken place. If you look at those dotted lines, each person is actually doing the work, but a project manager has been assigned. Now, if you don't have a title of a project manager, your responsibilities have been minimized. Remember, you are in a balanced project matrix. If this was a functional or a functional matrix, you will be continuing on to do all your day-to-day operations while managing the project. But now there's a little bit of a difference. You're in a balanced project matrix. Balanced project matrix and projectized organization usually have the title project manager or a project coordinator. That means the upper management sees the importance of that lab being created at the end of 6 weeks, and now they're going to assign at least, if not a full-time person, at least close to being a full-time person as a project manager to oversee this creation or implementation of a lab. So all of a sudden, you have been asked to leave all your responsibilities to the side and focus on this. That is why you see the title project manager now. Very, very important for all of you to understand the difference. Now when you have the title project manager, your day in, day out activities rely on the successful implementation of that lab. The staff from different departments are also working full-time with you. If needed, they can be called by their individual line managers or functional managers, but usually they work in a team. And all of it will be going on in the Department of Project Coordination. So all of this is coordinated, and within, from balance matrix to projectized organization, now you have the need to deliver things on time, on budget, and within the scope of the intended requirements from the customer. The third category is the project-based organization, and this I call the storybook definition. Very few organizations in the world, maybe 2 or 3% of the organizations in the world still are truly projectized organization or are truly project-based organization. And the reason why organizations, even though they understand the importance of all those needs to become projectized, they still are not project-based organization, is because of the human resources. If we are living in a world of depleting resources, we are trying to maximize the resources. It's also the human resources that are getting depleted, and the skill set. So if you're working on a 2-year, 3-year long project, you bring in resources, you train them You use all your team building skills, and now you have come across several resources who are really good resources. They work well with you. They deliver work on time. They're very efficient and they're very effective. 3 years later, your project ends, and according to the project-based definition organization, you will let go until the next project comes along. You still manage to keep them on, but 2 years later, there's a period, there's a gap in between. What do you do with those resources? You have to let them go, and what's the guarantee that you will get the same resources back for your project? In a recession world, that probability may exist. However, there is no guarantee with it. That is why most organizations who are very, very projectized, in a lot of work that is going on, they still tend to put people on different assignments on training skills, and still are considered project-based matrix organization. And hence the word being on bench, sent on training, leisure time between different projects, creating new work, coming up with new projects, coming up with new skill set development activities are all in existence because organizations, especially big organizations, don't want to let go of their better resources in between projects. About the project-based organization. In a project-based organization, most of the work performed is project work. And this is reflected in the organization structure, which is not based on the functional paradigm, but changes according to the projects which the organization has in its portfolio. So these organizations don't have a procurement department, a human resource department, a legal department, a general administration department, a cleaning services department, a bookkeeping department, the technical experts department. These organizations, they get a project and they get human resources, or they get resources to work on all of these activities, which are a little bit of procurement, a little bit of human resources management, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But the main goal is only to fulfill the needs of that particular project. Project-based organizations are often found in the defense and construction industries. Now, if you recall again that slide, bottom being the manufacturing plants, so these are the functional organization going on. If you look at the epitome of it, what was that? The defense, and a little bit lower was the construction, and then the NGOs in between. So you are actually going down from typical non-project based to functional to matrix, functional matrix, and then the balance matrix to project matrix to strongly project-based organization, and that is the arrow. Project-based organizations are often found in the defense and construction industries, in the movie industry, in some NGOs, and in some outsourced industries, where, for example, in creation of a movie, you bring in all of the new resources, you sign new contracts with them for the life of the project. If it extends a little bit, there are approvals that tell you and kind of engage you for the next 2 months. If not, then you are free to go. Either way. Okay? A strong or project matrix organization, again, functional matrix, projectized. So the project matrix and projectized industry are going hand in hand on that side. A stronger project matrix organization is best for handling cross-functional project needs for a large and complex project. Larger the project is, more complex the project is, you need dedicated resources working on it without any conflicting orders that are given by other managers. They come in, they work for you, they deliver the tasks for you for that particular project, for you as a project manager. Their main goal, their main priority is to deliver the project tasks on time, on schedule, and on budget, and ultimately reaching for the successful implementation of the project. Wonderful world of project management. So, structure of a project-based organization. If you look at in any corporation X, and these are, we're talking about big project-based organizations, you do have major departments in there who are actually tackling and continues to keep the industry or the organization going. The marketing, the finance and administration, the legal, the human resources, who are actually responsible for example, the human resource department is responsible for bringing in the right skill set, signing off the contract, taking care of some of the human resource issues. The marketing department continues to exist because they're responsible for bringing in the project, and they all get a little share from the projects that are going on. And the little share or the percentage of the finances that each of those departments get from the ongoing projects legitimizes their existence in the organization. So the marketing is also given a target. You have to bring in so many millions of rupees or dollars within a year, otherwise you cannot continue to exist. The human resource or the legal department continues to follow the same pattern. So within this department, you have a project manager for product or delivery of product A. Within it, he or she as a project manager would have the engineering, the manufacturing, the procurement. These could be full-time resources or they could be part-time resources. However, for the time that they are allocated, their priority is to report to the project manager, and the project manager is the ultimate person responsibility for the deliverables or for the work being produced by these individuals. The next one could be a project manager for a product B. Again, he or she would have all these individuals reporting directly to nobody else but to himself or herself. And so on and so forth. The bigger the organization is, many more projects are going in, are working at the same time. We could have the leverage of using part-time resources, but 50% in project A, 50% in project B, but the project manager understands that based on the estimates, 20 hours in a week was sufficient for the procurement guy to take care of the procurement activities. And so by Friday 4 p.m., he or she will not have an excuse of not having time or being occupied on something else. So if the estimation process was correct, that work will be done by Friday 4 p.m. by that procurement person. If the person is working full-time on that project, the complexity decreases, and all of a sudden, based on the estimates, he or she will be able to deliver on time. So Within the project-based organization, the life of a project manager simplifies to some extent, because now all of a sudden you are in control, and if you are now being asked to be accountable for the delivery of the project, you have responsible individuals who will deliver on time, on schedule, and on budget. Project-based organization is again the kind of an industry or kind of an organization that is talked about in project management books, or are the followers of a certain methodology. If we reiterate and go back to whatever we have talked about now, let's think about what we have talked about. We talked about the project organization, what projects are and what are not projects. We've talked about non-project organizations in the world versus project-based organizations, where there is a mindset going on that yes, we need to do these things effectively and efficiently and make the maximum use of our resources, or get the maximum benefit out of the resources that have been allocated to our projects. So, project versus non-project. Within the project-based organizations, you have functional, you have matrix, and you have project-based organization. The organizational chart that have been shown to you would display very accurately where the loyalties of these individuals lie. Within the functional and the functional matrix kind of organization, there is no title as project manager. You would see titles as project expediters, or you will see titles as project coordinator, but they have so many other responsibilities going on that even within the important tasks that they've been assigned, they would have to prioritize their work activities. And hence, the delivery of on schedule, on budget, and on time or within scope minimizes in these organizations. From balance matrix to project-based organization, you usually see titles as project managers or program managers, and you see more focus of meeting the triple constraints of the project. And hence the responsibility and the accountability of the project resources also is given a lot of importance. Have a great reading time. Focus a little bit on the slides. Fairly easy concepts to understand and grasp. But a little bit of reference material reading would also help in this case. If you have access to Harold Kerzner's book, the first 5 chapters will give you an overview of what we have talked about in the last few lectures. It will also set some kind of leveled understanding of where we are going from this point onwards. Good luck and best wishes for happy reading. Allah Hafiz, and I will see you in next lecture.